January 21st, 2008. A security guard arrives for his shift at the Yuanlin Finance and Economics Building in Changhua County, Taiwan. It's a routine morning. The sun is already climbing over the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty streets of Yuanlin, a small city most people have never heard of unless they live there. The building itself is unremarkable. 16 stories of concrete and glass, built sometime in the 1980s when Taiwan's economy was booming and everyone wanted office space. The lower floors house small businesses, accounting firms, insurance offices, the kind of places where people shuffle papers and answer phones. The upper floors are residential units, modest apartments for people who can't afford to live anywhere better. The security guard, whose name was never released to the press, walks through the lobby and begins his usual checks. Doors locked. Windows secure, nothing out of place, except there is something out of place. Outside the stairwell on the first floor, he notices a pair of women's shoes. Black flats worn at the heels, the kind of shoes a mother might wear. They've been kicked off hastily, left at odd angles like someone stepped out of them mid-stride. Strange, but not alarming. People leave things behind all the time. Then he enters the elevator and sees something on the floor. A red coat, neatly folded, and beside it a small pair of child's shoes. Now his unease deepens. He picks up the coat. It's cold to the touch, damp from the night air that seeps into the building through cracks in the windows. He holds it for a moment, trying to decide what to do, and then he takes it to the building manager. The manager is in his small office on the first floor, drinking tea and reading the morning paper. When the security guard shows him the coat and the shoes, the manager's face changes. He sets down his tea. He remembers something. Last night, around 10 p.m. He was still awake, finishing paperwork, when a woman rushed through the lobby. She had a young girl with her, maybe 4 or 5 years old. The woman was frantic, moving fast. Her eyes focused straight ahead like she was running from something or running towards something. The manager had stopped her, asked what her business was. The building has security protocols. You're not supposed to just walk in at night, especially if you're not a resident. The woman barely looked at him. She pushed past, muttered something about meeting a friend, and went straight to the elevator. The little girl followed, holding her mother's hand, silent. The manager watched them get into the elevator. The doors closed. And that was the last time he saw them. He never saw them leave. The building manager and the security guard exchange a look. Something is wrong. They go to the security office and pull up the CCTV footage. What they see makes no sense. The footage is grainy, black and white, the kind of low-resolution recording you get from cheap cameras installed decades ago. But it's clear enough. At 10:03 p.m., the woman and the child enter the elevator. The woman is wearing the red coat. The child is wearing a smaller coat, pink or maybe light blue. It's hard to tell in the monochrome footage. They're both wearing shoes. The woman presses a button. The camera inside the elevator shows which floor, 11, the second-to-last floor in the building. Then, while the elevator is moving, she does something strange. She reaches down and begins to unbutton her red coat. Her movements are deliberate, calm, almost mechanical. She removes the coat, folds it carefully, and places it on the elevator floor in the corner. Then she crouches down and removes the child's coat. The little girl stands still, obedient, as her mother takes off her coat and sets it down beside the red one. Next, the woman slips off her shoes. She does this without bending down, just stepping out of them 1 foot at a time, leaving them near the coats. The child does the same. 2 small shoes placed beside her mother's. Now they're both in lighter clothing. The woman is wearing what looks like a long-sleeved shirt and pants. The child is in a dress or a shirt and skirt. Both are barefoot. The elevator reaches the 11th floor. The number lights up on the panel, the doors slide open, and then they run. Not walk, run. The woman grabs the child's hand, and they sprint out of the elevator, down the hallway, their bare feet silent on the tile floor. The hallway camera captures them for only a few seconds. They're moving fast, heading toward the far end of the corridor, where the emergency stairwell is located. The stairwell is the only way to access the rooftop. They disappear into the stairwell. The door closes behind them. That is the last time Liu Huijun and her daughter appear on any camera. The building manager stares at the screen. The security guard stands beside him, silent. They rewind the footage, watch it again and again. The woman's face is visible in the elevator. She looks tired. Her hair is pulled back in a ponytail. Her expression is blank, not frightened, not sad, just empty. The child's face is harder to see. She's looking down most of the time, holding her mother's hand. The building manager's first thought is suicide. In Taiwan, as in many East Asian cultures, there's a tradition associated with taking your own life. You remove your shoes before you die. It's a symbolic act, a way of showing respect, of not tracking dirt into the afterlife. And the rooftop, that's where people go when they've made a final decision. Jump from the roof. Leave this world cleanly. The manager picks up the phone and calls the police. Officers arrive within the hour. It's early morning now, the city is waking up. But inside the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building, time feels frozen. The police review the footage. They see what the manager saw. A woman and a child, removing their coats and shoes, running toward the rooftop. They agree with the manager's assessment. This looks like a suicide. But protocol demands they check. So they walk around the exterior of the building, searching for bodies. The building sits on a busy street corner in Yuanlin. Storefronts line the ground floor. A convenience store, a noodle shop, a place that sells mobile phone accessories. The sidewalk is narrow. If someone had jumped from the roof, their body would be on the pavement, visible to anyone passing by. There's nothing. No bodies on the ground, no blood, no signs of impact. No curious crowd gathered around a police cordon. The officers look up at the building. 16 stories. The rooftop is flat, surrounded by a low wall. The balconies for the apartments and offices are recessed. They don't extend beyond the rooftop. There's nowhere for a body to land except the ground. If Liu Huijun and her daughter had jumped, their bodies would be here. They're not. One of the officers, a veteran who's been doing this job for 20 years, suggests they check the rooftop itself. Maybe they didn't jump. Maybe they're still up there, hiding or hurt or worse. The officers enter the building and take the elevator to the top floor. From there they climb the emergency stairwell to the rooftop access door. It's unlocked. In Taiwan, rooftop doors are often left unlocked for maintenance, for residents who hang laundry up there, for emergencies. They step out onto the rooftop. It's a typical Taiwanese rooftop. Concrete, cracked in places from years of weather, metal railings rusted from humidity. A few old chairs long since abandoned, clotheslines strung between poles, a water tower, a transformer box humming quietly, ventilation units for the building's air conditioning, a communications tower bristling with antennas. The officers spread out and search. They walk every inch of the rooftop. They open the transformer box, peer inside. They check the ventilation vents, looking for any sign that someone might have tried to hide inside. They inspect the water tower, a large cylindrical tank raised on metal legs. The access hatch is closed, secured with a rusted padlock that hasn't been opened in years. They find nothing. No signs of a struggle, no clothing, no shoes, no suicide note, no blood, no evidence that anyone had been up here recently. One officer stands at the edge of the rooftop and looks down. From up here you can see most of Yuanlin. The city sprawls out in every direction, low buildings and narrow streets, scooters buzzing like insects, the distant mountains hazy in the morning light. It's a long way down. 16 stories. You wouldn't survive that fall. But if someone had fallen, where are the bodies? The officers go back downstairs. They begin to consider other possibilities. Maybe Liu Huijun and her daughter didn't go to the rooftop. Maybe they left through a different exit. Maybe they're hiding somewhere in the building. Maybe the cameras missed them. But the cameras didn't miss anything. The Yuanlin Finance and Economics building has security cameras covering every single entrance and exit. This isn't a modern system with high-definition cameras and facial recognition. It's old, analog, tape-based. But it works. Every door is covered. The front entrance, the back door, the side exits, the parking garage entrance, the basement access. The police requisition all the footage from the night of January 20th and the morning of January 21st. They set up in the security office and begin reviewing, hour by hour. Liu Huijun and her daughter do not appear on any of the footage leaving the building. The front entrance camera shows the manager sitting at his desk, shows the occasional resident coming home late, shows a delivery driver dropping off packages. But no woman and child. The back door, which leads to a service alley, shows nothing but stray cats. The side exits, which are fire doors that trigger an alarm when opened, remain closed all night. To be absolutely certain, the police also review footage from adjacent stores and nearby residential buildings. A convenience store across the street has a camera pointed at the sidewalk. An apartment building next door has cameras in its lobby. A traffic camera at the intersection captures vehicles and pedestrians. Liu Huijun and her daughter do not appear on any of them. The The police widen their search. Maybe they got into a car, maybe someone picked them up. They review the parking garage footage. The Yuanlin Finance and Economics building has an underground parking garage, 2 levels deep. Residents and office workers park there. The entrance is controlled by a barrier gate that only opens with a keycard or a ticket. The police review the footage from 10 p.m. on January 20th to 8 a.m. on January 21st. Not a single car enters or exits. The garage is completely still. There's no way Liu Huijun and her daughter could have been smuggled out in a vehicle. Next, the police check the basement. The parking garage is on the first basement level. Below that, there's a second basement level, older, mostly unused. It's dark down there, damp, the kind of place people avoid. Storage rooms filled with old furniture. Utility closets, pipes and electrical conduits running along the ceiling. At the far end of the second basement, there's a back door. It's a heavy metal security door, the kind designed to keep people out, not in. It leads to an adjacent building. The police examine the door. It's locked from the inside. But more than that, it's covered in dust. The kind of thick, undisturbed dust that accumulates over years. The lock mechanism is rusted. There are no footprints on the floor near the door. No handprints on the handle. This door hasn't been opened in a very long time. Just to be thorough, the police have it unlocked anyway. It takes 2 officers and a crowbar to get it open, the hinges screaming in protest. Beyond the door is an abandoned billiard hall, one of those businesses that opened in the 1990s during Taiwan's billiard craze, and then quietly died when the trend passed. The tables are still there, covered in plastic tarps. The walls are water-stained. The floor is littered with debris. There are no signs of recent occupation. No footprints in the dust. No disturbances. Nothing. The police check the basement for other potential exits. There are several manhole covers set into the floor, access points to the city's sewer system. But each cover weighs over 50 kilograms. There's no way a single woman could lift one, let alone while carrying a 4-year-old child. The police are left with one conclusion: Liu Huijun and her daughter never left the building, which means they must still be inside. So they search, they start at the top and work their way down floor by floor. The rooftop has already been searched, but they do it again. Every corner, every piece of equipment. The transformer box is opened and the interior inspected, even though it's barely large enough to fit a child, let alone an adult. The 5 ventilation vents are examined, the communications towers checked, its base, its supports, its access panels. The water tank is the most promising hiding spot, but the access hatch is padlocked and the lock is old and rusted, clearly untouched for years. Still, they have it cut open. Inside, the water is clear, empty, no bodies, no clothing, nothing. They move to the 16th floor. This is the top residential floor. The hallway is narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. The lighting is dim, fluorescent tubes that flicker and hum. There are 4 apartments on this floor. The police knock on each door, wake the residents, ask if they heard or saw anything unusual the night before. No one heard anything. No one saw anything. They were all asleep. The officers ask if they can search the apartments. Some residents agree. Others refuse. Without a search warrant, without probable cause, without evidence of a crime, the police can't force entry. They make notes. They move on. Floor by floor, they work their way down. Each floor has 4 to 6 apartments. Each hallway looks the same. Each set of residents says the same thing: no, we didn't hear anything. No, we didn't see anything. We were asleep. The 11th floor is where Liu Huijun was last seen. The police pay special attention here. The hallway is longer than the others, stretching the full length of the building. At one end is the elevator. At the other end is the emergency stairwell. The police walk the hallway slowly, examining every detail. The floor is tile, scuffed and cracked in places. The walls are painted a dull beige, marked with years of wear. There are no bloodstains, no signs of struggle, no discarded items. They check each apartment door. All are locked. The residents are questioned, same answers. No, nothing unusual. No, we didn't hear anything. One resident, an elderly woman who lives alone, says she thought she heard footsteps in the hallway around 10 p.m. Fast footsteps, like someone running. But she didn't think much of it. Sometimes the children in the building play in the hallways. She went back to sleep. The police note this. It corroborates the surveillance footage. Liu Huijun and her daughter were running. But why? Running from what? Running toward what? The police search the stairwell. It's narrow, concrete, utilitarian. The kind of stairwell that's only used in emergencies. The walls are bare concrete. The steps are metal, coated in a non-slip texture that's worn smooth in the center from years of use. There's no natural light. Just a single bare bulb on each landing, casting harsh shadows. The stairwell connects all 16 floors. At the top, a door leads to the rooftop. At the bottom, a door leads to the lobby. The police check every landing, every corner, every shadow. They find nothing. No clothing, no shoes, no signs that anyone passed through here recently. They move to the lower floors, office spaces. Most are closed at night. The police contact the business owners, ask for keys, search each office. Desks, filing cabinets, storage closets, bathrooms, nothing. By the end of the day, after searching the entire building from top to bottom, the police are left with a baffling mystery. Liu Huijun and her 4-year-old daughter entered the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building at 10:03 p.m. on January 20th, 2008. They took the elevator to the 11th floor. They ran toward the rooftop. They did not leave through any of the exits. They did not jump from the rooftop. They are not hiding in the building. They have simply vanished. The police don't know what to make of this. In all their years of experience, they've never encountered anything like it. People don't just disappear. There's always an explanation, a body, evidence, something. But here, there's nothing. The case officially becomes a missing persons investigation. But how do you investigate a disappearance when you don't even know the names of the missing? The police have the security footage, but it's low resolution. The woman's face is visible, but not clear enough for facial recognition. She's just a woman in a red coat. The child is even harder to identify. Just a small figure, holding her mother's hand. The police decide to go public. They have the local news broadcast the security footage, hoping someone will recognize the woman and child and come forward with information. The footage airs on the evening news. It's presented as a mystery. A woman and child, identity unknown, vanished inside a building. If you recognize them, please contact the police. The response is immediate. Dozens of calls flood the police station. But most are dead ends. People claiming to recognize the woman, but their tips lead nowhere. People with theories about what happened, but no actual information. Days pass. The investigation stalls. Then, on January 28th, 8 days after the disappearance, something happens. A security guard at the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building, a different guard, one who's worked there for many years, notices something odd in the parking garage. An out-of-place moped. The guard knows the vehicles that belong to the residents. He knows where they park, how they park. This moped is parked right at the entrance to the garage, blocking the ramp, inconsiderate to the elderly residents who have trouble maneuvering around obstacles. The moped has been sitting there for several days. The keys are still in the ignition, dangling from the handlebars like whoever parked it intended to come right back. Annoyed by the inconsiderate parking, the guard calls the police. 2 officers arrive. They run the license plate. The moped is registered to a woman named Liu Huijun, age 37, address Shetu Township, Changhua County. The officers look at each other. The name means nothing to them at first. Then one of them remembers. There was a missing persons report filed on January 20th. A woman and her daughter, reported missing by the husband. The local police in Shetu had issued a notice, conducted a small search, found nothing. They pull up the report. Liu Huijun, 37 years old, reported missing by her husband on the evening of January 20th, the same day she was last seen in the elevator. The officers immediately contact the Shetu police. They relay the information, the moped, the building, the security footage. The Shetu police contact Liu Huijun's husband. They tell him to turn on the television. The footage has been airing on the news for days now. He watches. And he confirms that's his wife. That's their daughter. The mystery now has names, Liu Huijun, and her 4-year-old daughter, whose name was never released to the press to protect her privacy. But knowing their names doesn't bring them any closer to being found. If anything, it makes the case stranger. Because now the police know Liu Huijun had no connection to the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building. She didn't own an apartment there. She didn't rent office space. She didn't work there. None of her friends or relatives lived or worked there. The building was 8 kilometers from her home. 8 kilometers in the opposite direction of anywhere she would normally go. Why did she drive there? Why that building specifically? To understand what might have driven Liu Huijun to that building on the night of January 20th, 2008, you need to understand her life. And her life had not been an easy one. Liu Huijun was born in 1971 in a small village in Shetu Township, Changhua County. Shetu is rural Taiwan, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where traditions run deep, where the old ways are still respected. Rice fields stretch for miles. The air smells like earth and rain. Time moves slowly. Huijun grew up in a traditional family. Her mother was strict, conservative, deeply rooted in the values of their village. Her father worked the land. Huijun had siblings, but she was the eldest daughter, which came with expectations. Eldest daughters are supposed to be responsible, obedient. They're supposed to set an example. Huijun was described by those who knew her as beautiful. She had delicate features, long dark hair, and a quiet grace. She was also intelligent. She finished junior high school, which was more education than many girls in her village received at the time. And she had dreams. After graduating, Huijun told her mother she wanted to go to Taipei to study hairdressing. Taipei, the capital, the big city, hours away by train. It was a bold dream for a girl from a rural village. Surprisingly, her mother agreed. Maybe she saw potential in her daughter. Maybe she thought it would be good for Huijun to learn a trade. Maybe she just wanted her out of the house. So Huijun went to Taipei. She enrolled in a hairdressing school. She was good at it. She had an eye for style, for color, for making people feel beautiful. She had plans. She would finish school, get a job at a salon, maybe even open her own shop someday. She also attracted attention. Men noticed her. She had suitors, offers, invitations. For a while, it seemed like her life was opening up, full of possibilities, but her mother had other plans. Back in Shetu, Huijun's mother had been quietly arranging something. A marriage. There was a man, a landowner, well off by village standards. He owned fields, had a house, a stable income. He was looking for a wife. Huijun's mother saw an opportunity. A good match. Security for her daughter. A step up in the world. She called Huijun back to the village. Told her there was something important. Huijun came home, expecting maybe a family event, a celebration, something urgent but temporary. Instead, her mother told her she was getting married. Huijun protested. She had plans. She was in school. She had a life in Taipei. She barely knew this man. But in their village, in their family, the mother's word was law. And besides, it was already arranged. The man had agreed. His family had agreed. The village expected it. To back out now would bring shame on the family. Huijun gave up her dreams. She gave up her studies. She came home and married a man she barely knew. Together they had 3 children. The marriage was not a happy one. Those who knew the family would later describe it in careful, restrained language. They used words like difficult and complicated. But the truth, pieced together from interviews and police reports, was darker. Huijun stayed home to care for the children. That was her role now. Cook, clean, raise the kids. The traditional life of a village wife. Her husband, meanwhile, did little. He was supposed to work the land, manage the property, provide for the family. But he spent most of his time drinking. He would leave the house in the morning under the pretense of work, but instead he'd go to the village drinking establishments, spend hours there, come home drunk. The debts piled up, bills went unpaid, the creditors came knocking, and when he was drunk he was violent. The details were never fully disclosed, but neighbors heard shouting. The children were seen with bruises. Huijun became withdrawn, stopped going out, stopped talking to people. Eventually, she filed for divorce. This was a brave decision. In rural Taiwan, especially in a conservative village like Shetu, divorce was rare. It was seen as shameful, a failure. A woman who divorced was looked down upon, gossiped about, treated as damaged goods, but Huijun did it anyway. She couldn't take it anymore. The divorce was finalized. For a brief time she was free, but the pressure from the village, from her own family, was immense. Huijun's mother, who had arranged the marriage in the first place, was humiliated. She pressured her daughter to reconcile. The husband's family pressured him. The village elders got involved. The husband swore he would change. He would stop drinking. He would be a better husband, a better father. He begged Huijun to take him back. And under the weight of all that pressure, all that shame, all that expectation, Huijun agreed. They remarried. And soon after they had another child, their youngest daughter, the 4-year-old who would disappear with her mother. But of course nothing changed. The husband didn't stop drinking. In fact, his drinking got worse. He drank heavily every night. The abuse continued. The debts continued. And Huijun, trapped in a marriage she didn't want, in a life she never chose, began to unravel. Friends and relatives would later say that her mental state deteriorated rapidly in the months leading up to her disappearance. She became more withdrawn. More erratic. She would have sudden mood swings, fits of anger or tears. She stopped taking care of herself. She talked about wanting to leave, to go somewhere far away, to start over. But she had 3 children, and in her village, you don't just leave your children. On January 19th, 2008, Huijun and her husband had a fight. The details of the fight were never disclosed, but neighbors heard shouting late into the night. The next day, January 20th, the argument resumed. It started in the morning and continued through the afternoon. At some point around 2 or 3 p.m., something snapped. Huijun grabbed her youngest daughter, got on her moped, and drove off. Her husband assumed she was going to her mother's house. That's where she usually went when things got bad. It was a 3-minute drive. She'd go there, vent to her mother, calm down and come back. He figured she'd be back by evening, but she didn't come back. By nightfall, the husband started to worry. He drove to his mother-in-law's house. Huijun wasn't there. His mother-in-law said she hadn't seen her all day. He drove around the village, visiting Huijun's friends. None of them had seen her. He tried calling her cell phone. It was turned off. Panicking now, he went to the local police station in Shetu and filed a missing persons report. The police took down the information. Liu Huijun, 37 years old, last seen around 3 p.m. on January 20th, riding a moped, license plate number on file, traveling with her 4-year-old daughter. The police issued a missing persons notice. They conducted a small local search, visiting friends and relatives' homes, checking the usual places someone might go. They asked around the village. Had anyone seen Huijun? Huijun's eldest daughter, who was around 10 or 11 at the time, told the police that her mother had mentioned going to a friend's house for a few days. She said she'd be back soon. The police assumed Huijun had gotten upset, left to cool off, and would return when she was ready. This kind of thing happens sometimes. Domestic disputes, temporary separations. People usually came back. They didn't think she'd driven 8 kilometers to Yuanlin. There was no reason for her to go there. Their initial investigation turned up nothing. The case was filed. And then, 5 days later, the footage from the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building surfaced. Suddenly, everything changed. The police now knew where Huijun had gone. But they still didn't know why. Why that building? What was she doing there? Was she meeting someone? Was she running away? Was she planning to jump? Investigators started digging into Huijun's life, trying to find any connection to the building or to Yuanlin. They interviewed her friends, her relatives, her husband. No one knew of any connection. Huijun had no friends in Yuanlin. She'd never worked there. She'd never mentioned the building. One theory emerged. Maybe she was having an affair. Maybe she had a lover who lived in the building. Maybe she went there to meet him. Maybe something happened. But this theory was quickly dismissed. Huijun was described by everyone who knew her as an introvert. She rarely went out. She didn't socialize. She spent all her time at home with her children. The idea that she was carrying on a secret affair seemed implausible. And even if she was, why would she bring her 4-year-old daughter? Another theory, maybe she went there to jump. Maybe she chose that building specifically because it was far from home, far from anyone who knew her. Maybe she wanted to make a statement. Maybe she wanted to disappear without anyone finding her body. But if that was the plan, why didn't she jump? Why remove her coat and shoes in the elevator? Why run toward the rooftop and then? Nothing. The police kept searching. They returned to the building again and again over the following weeks. Each time they searched a little more thoroughly. They questioned residents who hadn't been home the first time. They checked maintenance rooms, utility closets, elevator shafts. Nothing. In the days and weeks that followed, the case began to fade from the news. Other stories took precedence. The police had other cases to work on. The investigation slowed. By the end of February 2008, the case had gone cold. Liu Huijun and her daughter were still missing. No bodies had been found. No new evidence had surfaced. The case file remained open, but active investigation ceased. 5 years passed. And then in 2013, something happened on the other side of the world that would bring the case back into the spotlight. In February 2013, a 21-year-old Canadian student named Elisa Lam was found dead in a water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. Her disappearance had been mysterious. Security footage from the hotel showed her behaving erratically in an elevator, pressing multiple buttons, stepping in and out, looking down the hallway as if hiding from someone. The footage went viral. Millions of people watched it, trying to decipher what was happening. When Elisa's body was eventually found in the rooftop water tank, it sparked a media frenzy. How did she get into the tank? Why was she in the elevator behaving so strangely? Was it drugs? Mental illness? Murder? The case became international news. And when the story reached Taiwan, many people immediately thought of Liu Huijun. The parallels were impossible to ignore. A woman, an elevator, strange behavior, a rooftop, a disappearance. Local newspapers in Taiwan began running stories about the case, drawing comparisons. They started calling Liu Huijun's disappearance Taiwan's Elisa Lam. The coverage reignited public interest. Online forums exploded with theories. News programs dedicated segments to the mystery, and the police, prompted by the renewed attention, decided to reopen the investigation. Among those who took notice were the very officers who had investigated the case back in 2008. One officer in particular, whose name was never released, became convinced that Elisa Lam's body being found in a water tank might be the key. What if Liu Huijun and her daughter were in the water tank on the roof of the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building? The police had searched the tank back in 2008, but they hadn't opened it. The access hatch had been padlocked, the lock was old and rusted, and it seemed clear that no one had tampered with it. They had assumed the tank was secure. But now, inspired by the Elisa Lam case, they decided to check again. In March 2013, the police returned to the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building. They brought bolt cutters and cut the padlock off the water tank. They climbed the ladder and opened the access hatch. Inside, the water was clear. They used flashlights, swept the beam across the interior of the tank, looking for any sign of remains. Nothing. The tank was empty except for water. They decided to drain it anyway, just to be sure. It took hours. Pumps were brought in. The water was emptied into the street drains. When the tank was finally dry, officers climbed inside and examined every inch of the interior. No bodies, no clothing, no bones. Nothing. It had been 5 years since the disappearance. If Huijun and her daughter had been in the water, there would still be evidence. Bones don't dissolve. Fabric doesn't disappear. The police also noted something else. In the 5 years since the disappearance, not a single resident of the building had complained about the water. No foul tastes, no strange odors, no discoloration. If 2 bodies had been decomposing in the water tank for 5 years, the residents would have noticed. Still, the police pressed on. They searched all the building's water pipes, inspecting every section, looking for blockages or evidence that remains might have been flushed into the system. Again, nothing. While the investigation was reopened, the police decided to take a different approach. They checked Liu Huijun's financial records, her bank cards, her health insurance card, her credit cards. Had any of them been used since January 20th, 2008? No, not a single transaction. They also checked enrollment records for schools. Her daughter would have been 9 years old by 2013. If Huijun had somehow escaped and started a new life somewhere, she would have needed to enroll her daughter in school. No child matching her daughter's name or birth date had been enrolled in any school in Taiwan. It was as if Liu Huijun and her daughter had vanished from the face of the earth. The 2013 investigation concluded with the same result as the 2008 investigation. No new evidence, no answers, no closure. The case went cold again. 8 more years passed. In 2021, the police reopened the case one more time. An unidentified corpse had been found in a rural area of Changhua County. The body was badly decomposed, making visual identification impossible. But it was a woman, approximately the right age. The police contacted Liu Huijun's family and requested DNA samples. They wanted to compare the DNA of Huijun's relatives to the unidentified body. The tests were conducted. The results came back. The body was not Liu Huijun. The case went cold again, and this time it seemed like it would stay cold forever. But then, in late December 2023, something happened that would bring the case back into the news one final time. Liu Huijun's husband, now 50 years old, was repairing a water tower on the roof of his home. He was alone, working in the late afternoon when he slipped and fell from the roof. The fall was catastrophic. He hit the ground head first. The impact caused severe trauma to his skull and brain. Neighbors heard the crash and called for an ambulance, but by the time it arrived, he was already dead. His death was ruled an accident. No foul play was suspected. Just a tragic fall. But the timing, The circumstances, the eerie symmetry of it all, a man whose wife disappeared from a rooftop, now dead from a fall from a rooftop, sparked a wave of speculation. The Taiwanese media picked up the story. Old articles about Liu Huijun's disappearance were republished. The security footage was aired again. Online forums erupted with theories. Had the husband known something? Had guilt finally caught up with him? Was this divine justice? There were even talks of reopening the investigation again in light of the husband's death. Some investigators suggested that maybe, just maybe, his death would provide new leads. But in the end, nothing came of it. The husband was dead. Whatever he knew, if he knew anything, died with him. Not long after his death, a court in Taiwan declared Liu Huijun and her daughter legally dead in absentia. After 15 years missing, with no evidence of life, the legal system had no choice but to presume death. The case was officially closed. So what happened to Liu Huijun and her 4-year-old daughter? 17 years later, there are 4 prevailing theories. None of them can be proven. All of them have problems. Theory 1, she knew someone in the building. Perhaps Liu Huijun was having an affair. Perhaps she had a secret lover, someone she'd met online or through a mutual acquaintance. Perhaps she arranged to meet him at his apartment in the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building on the night of January 20th. She brought her daughter with her because she couldn't leave her at home. The argument with her husband had been volatile. Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she wanted her daughter close. She went to the lover's apartment. Something happened behind closed doors. A fight. An accident. Something violent. The lover panicked. He killed her. He killed the child. And then, over the course of many days, he dismembered their bodies, removing them piece by piece in garbage bags, disposing of them in dumpsters around the city. This theory has been popular online, especially on true crime forums. It would explain the lack of bodies. It would explain why they never left the building on camera. They left in pieces, hidden in bags, carried out by someone who lived there. But this theory has significant problems. First, no one lived on the 11th floor where Huijun was last seen. The police confirmed this. The 11th floor was entirely offices and they were all empty at night. Second, Huijun was described as an introvert who rarely left her home. The idea that she was carrying on a secret affair requires us to believe she was living a double life. It's not impossible, but it seems unlikely. Third, it doesn't explain why she removed her coat and shoes in the elevator. If she was meeting a lover, why the strange ritualistic behavior? And fourth, it doesn't explain why she would bring her daughter. If you're meeting a lover, you don't bring your 4-year-old child. Theory 2, they died inside the building and their bodies were never found. Perhaps Liu Huijun and her daughter went to the rooftop and died there, not by jumping, but by some other means. Perhaps Huijun took pills or used some other method of suicide that didn't require jumping. Perhaps their bodies are still in the building, hidden in some space the police never found. Maybe they're in a wall cavity. Maybe they're in a sealed-off room. Maybe they're in a ventilation shaft. Maybe they're mummified, preserved by the cold January weather, and that's why no one ever smelled decomposition. This theory has some appeal. It would explain why they never left the building. It would explain the lack of bodies on the ground. But it has problems too. The building was searched thoroughly, multiple times. Every floor, every room, every closet, every shaft. If there were hidden bodies, someone would have found them by now. And even mummification requires some decomposition. Even in cold weather, bodies release gases, fluids, odors. Someone would have noticed something in 17 years. Theory 3, she escaped the building and started a new life. Perhaps Liu Huijun found a way out of the building that the cameras didn't catch. Perhaps there was a blind spot, a maintenance passage, a route the police overlooked. She ran away with her daughter to escape her abusive husband. She wanted to start a new life somewhere far away where no one would find her. Her actions in the building, removing her coats, taking off her shoes, running toward the rooftop, were all meant to mislead investigators. She wanted everyone to think she'd committed suicide. That way no one would look for her. This theory is appealing because it gives Liu Huijun agency. It suggests she made a choice, that she took control of her life, that she escaped. But it has problems. First, if she wanted to start a new life, why didn't she take her eldest daughter? Why leave one child behind and take the other? Second, her financial records show no activity. No bank withdrawals, no credit card charges, no health insurance claims. If she's alive, how is she surviving? Third, her daughter would be 21 years old now. Old enough to have a social media presence, a job, a life. But there's no trace of her anywhere. Theory 4, she escaped the building to commit suicide somewhere else. Perhaps Liu Huijun found a way out of the building, but not to start a new life. Perhaps she left only to take her own life, and her daughter's, somewhere else, somewhere the bodies would never be found. Maybe she drove to the coast and walked into the ocean. Maybe she drove to the mountains and walked into the forest. Maybe she found a remote place far from anyone and ended it there. Her actions in the building were meant to confuse the police, to send them searching in the wrong place. That way her bodies would never be found, her husband would never have closure. The mystery would remain. This theory is dark, but it's not impossible. Taiwan has vast stretches of wilderness, mountains, forests, coastline, where a body could remain undiscovered for decades. But if that was her plan, why go to the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building at all? Why not just drive straight to wherever she intended to die? Why the elaborate misdirection? The truth is, we don't know. We may never know. Liu Huijun and her 4-year-old daughter entered the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building on the night of January 20th, 2008. They took an elevator to the 11th floor, removed their coats and shoes, and ran toward the rooftop. Every entrance and exit was covered by cameras. They did not leave. They did not jump. They were not found inside. They simply vanished. 17 years later, the security footage still exists. The moped is still in police evidence storage, rusting away. The red coat is still there, folded and bagged. A piece of physical evidence in a case with no answers. But Liu Huijun and her daughter are gone. And the Yuanlin Finance and Economics building, 16 stories tall, covered in cameras, searched dozens of times over nearly 2 decades, keeps its secret. People still live there. People still work there. Life goes on. But sometimes, late at night, when the hallways are empty and the only sound is the hum of the air conditioning, people say they hear footsteps. Fast footsteps, like someone running. The sound of bare feet on tile. And then, nothing. Just silence. And the question that will never be answered, where did they go?